Hello, and welcome to The Alt Left.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 17 of The Alt Left. We're recording on March 23rd, 2021. I am Chris, your host, and with me, as always, is Matthew Jumbo Johnson.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be back. Hello, everyone.
And producer, engineer, and eye candy, the good Reverend Dr. K.
Thanks.
We've got a heck of a topic today. We are going to talk about something in the news quite a bit, cancel culture. And luckily, cancel culture doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. So that about does it for tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Please come back next Monday. We're going to be here every week. Until then, take care of yourselves.
Whoa. Stop the music. Cancel culture absolutely exists.
Well, kind of. As a conservative talking point, maybe. All right, fine. We'll do an episode. So let's really seriously talk about this then. So the right wing is freaking out, claiming everything's cancel culture, that they're being canceled, and this is all censorship, and snowflakes are freaking out, and Gia Carrera should be given a statue, not be fired from her job. And most people on the left say it just sounds like consequences, or actions have consequences.
Because they do. And what we said to begin with is actually true. Cancel culture isn't a thing. It's a bunch of bullshit that the right made up because they're finally having to deal with the fact that they can't get away with a lot of their bullshit anymore. And it's not even a lot of their bullshit. It's like 10% of their horrible is not tolerated anymore, and they're going nuts over it.
I have one solid point that I've been saying to people that I haven't had refuted yet. I have yet to hear about someone getting canceled for their actions, quote unquote canceled, meaning they don't get to be as rich and famous anymore. These people aren't getting shot off into space. They got fired from their job. And I've yet to hear about a celebrity or anything being canceled for doing or saying something that wouldn't get you completely shit canned from any job. I want to point out, if you pull up Wikipedia and actually look up cancel culture on it, they list 4 of their prominent examples, right? These are the most famous, and everyone agrees, whether you like it or hate it, this is cancel culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So their first one is August 2017. James Damone was fired from Google after writing a controversial internal memo. In the memo, he called out culture at Google as ideological echo chamber and argued that gender disparities in the workplace could be partially explained by biological differences. Basically, he wrote a memo to the company saying women shouldn't get paid because they're weak. And it's unfair that he got fired, apparently. 2017 and 2018, part of the Me Too movement following Harvey Weinstein's sexual abuse allegations, numerous high-profile celebrities lost their reputations and some of their careers due to allegations of sexual harassment. It's like, yes, sexual harassment gets you fired.
On that note, I think the most well-known one in that bunch was Louis C.K. And just to put a little perspective on this, he had no charges brought against him. He took a 10-month career hiatus and then returned to sold-out shows. If that's your definition of canceled, I can think of plenty of people who would love that to be the only consequences they suffered for their horrible shit.
Yeah, and again, the last 2 ones, 2020 is Amy Cooper, the Central Park birdwatcher who told the cops that a black man was going to attack her. She got fired from her job because she lied. She filed false charges to police to try to get a black man who she didn't like shot. And then this year in 2020 in February, Donald McNeil Jr. was fired from the New York Times for repeating racial slurs. These are the prominent examples that everyone agrees on. It's like, yeah. So it just sounds, again, I can't think of anyone who works anywhere. And at Burger King, as a taxi driver, as a veterinarian, just pick your occupation. Unless your occupation is conservative blogger, who would keep their job after that? After sexual harassment, competing racial slurs, falsely accusing people of threats to the police because of their race and skin tone. Telling Google that women don't deserve equal pay and equality in the workplace. Who in any workplace or industry could possibly hope to keep their job with that?
No one. You couldn't. Here's the thing. I think maybe if you had a manager that agreed with you and the place was closed for the evening, yeah, you could get away with it in that context. But these people did this shit and it became publicly known. And I don't believe for a second that if it became publicly known or if it was done in public at any of the places you suggested, that person wouldn't have been fired on the fucking spot. I don't care what the manager thought.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, this is unacceptable behavior in our society. And one of the big ones that's happened is the Gina Carano scandal. She has the most trash behavior. So it's like, let's take a look at what she did in a year. And again, remember, this isn't someone who is an independent author or someone. She works for Disney, a family entertainment company. It's like working for the Hallmark channels and then going on a spree where you kick puppies and spit on babies. Like, no, you can't do that. This is family entertainment or becoming a porn star. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with that, but Hallmark isn't going to want to carry your brand anymore, and they're allowed to. Disney doesn't need to carry her. So what has she done? I mean, first, she completely mocks transgender people. She was asked to change. People were asking her to, list pronouns, which is, again, not mandatory. It's a nice thing to do. It shows that you're with the times. But of course, she's a backwards asshole, so she wouldn't. And then not only did she not do it, that's fine. She has every right to not list pronouns if she doesn't want to.
And then she doubled down, right?
Yeah, she doubled down and listed her pronouns as beep boop to mock people's pronouns in the trans community. So she didn't just not participate. She went out of her way to mock them. And then after being warned, huge public backlash. That's when the whole Fire Gina Carano hashtag came out. You'd think she'd learn from that. But no, she leaves Twitter. She jumps onto Fashbook, known as Parler. Gets onto Mindspace and just, completely just doubles down on this crap. And then starts comparing the struggle of conservatives to the persecution of Jews in Nazi Germany.
And let's put that word struggle in quotes here, because conservatives aren't struggling. They want people to think they're struggling. They're not fucking struggling.
I mean, it's a perfect analogy because her struggle with this, because it's not real, and she put it there herself, just like all conservative struggles.
Yep.
She did that. She uses the imagery of the persecution of the Holocaust and expects to keep a job at Disney.
Yeah. And let's just add one more tidbit onto that. She wasn't fucking fired. And this is the part that I love that everyone's just ignoring. She works on contract. Her contract came up for renewal. And before this even happened, Disney had already decided not to renew her contract. Now, I will grant you this. There were talks about doing a spin-off show. They were talks. Nothing had been set in stone. No contracts had been drawn up. And the moment she did this, they decided they weren't going to go in that direction.
Well, yeah, why would they?
Yeah. So there was no firing. They simply decided to let the contract lapse and not renew. Which is, again, they could have fired her. There would have been nothing wrong with firing her, but they didn't. They just decided to not continue their relationship with her.
Yeah,
because she's a bitch.
Can you imagine working for Taco Bell and saying a bunch of disparaging thing about trans people in public in view of the customers? Because you can argue that, well, this is a private time and a private... No. She's a celebrity. And she's on her public media page that all of the Disney fans follow. So that's... If you say something on a public media sphere like that, you're on the clock, homie. Can you imagine working at Taco Bell, working at Starbucks, working at Target, working at a bank? It doesn't matter. You're in earshot of all customers and you publicly mock trans people. And then when you're told you should stop doing that, the next day you come in and start screaming, well, this is worse than when the Jews got murdered. You think Wells Fargo's going to keep you on staff?
No, of course not. Why would they?
But this is more of the crybaby snowflake culture we see from the right. No one's better at projecting than the right. First of all, they have an absolute persecution fetish. No one sits up at night tweaking their nipples thinking about being persecuted more than conservatives. They love it. It's what they want. They want to cry about Starbucks cups, which is another example of cancel culture. They want to complain about that. Yeah, they want to do the war on Christmas, the most popular religion in the land, really. But because there's not enough Jesus on the Starbucks cups this year, which there never has been, as far as I know, Jesus did not arrive in Nazareth on a flying reindeer. So having less reindeer on the cups doesn't really take away from your faith now, does it? But they boycott Starbucks. They throw their Keurigs away. And no one is more apt and ready to cancel things than conservatives.
And that's, again, one of the things we like to talk about on this show is the just rampant hypocrisy of the right. Rampant. And this isn't to say the left doesn't have their faults too, but the right is unique in this. It is that they will commit some sort of an act or say something and then turn around and accuse the left of doing the same types of things and act like it's the worst thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's without shame. It's without remorse. It is just blatant in your face, and their base eats it up. And what's funny about it is the way they do it is so comical. So like, let's look at two instances of like what's called cancel culture. Now, let's take Harry Potter. And I'm doing that because I actually have a stake in this. As we've discussed, we're all nerds here. I'm a big Harry Potter nerd. Recently, as I'm sure most of our listeners know, J.K. Rowling has pretty much outed herself as a horrible person that's a transphobe. Okay. Not only that, but she's doubled down on that horrible. And so a lot of people are now just kind of not wanting to support her in what she's doing. And when the left wants to, quote unquote, cancel someone, it's simply a boycott. It is literally the market deciding they don't want to put their money into this product anymore.
Yeah, I didn't hear of a bunch of people going out burning all of their Harry Potter books.
No, because they fucking own them. Yet the right...
But you hear about conservatives going out and destroying their Nikes.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm mad at Nike because they support a black person's right to protest. I'm going to burn the shit I already gave them money for. And the best part that gets me,
and then they go right back out a couple of months later and they're going to buy their shoes again.
You know it. That's exactly what they did, is they went a couple of months without their fucking product. They needed a Keurig again, so they bought another fucking Keurig. Or they needed some shoes again, so they bought Nikes because all their friends were clowning them for wearing knockoffs or using knockoffs. And they didn't want to.
Well, it was time for a new Keurig anyway.
Yeah, right. So you've got
I still had all those unused pods.
You got that weird juxtaposition of like just the stupidity of how they do it. But make no mistake, they do it. But then there's also that added layer. Like I said, the right will constantly use the idea of a free market to justify whatever harmful, evil policies they put in place. Put more money in the pockets of the wealthy and less in the pockets of the poor.
Yeah, the same people who want to argue that bakers shouldn't have to bake gay wedding cakes and that the free market should decide it, that's the right of the business, are the first ones to cry foul when a business gets rid of a problematic employee.
And that's where it goes back to what we say. It was never about what they claim it is. When you boil these arguments down, it's not about the life of the baby. It's about the right of them to control women's bodies. It's not about the free market deciding. It's about them imposing their beliefs and their will on everyone else. That's what it is. And their political leaders are all too happy to capitalize on this, especially at a time right now where nothing Biden's doing is really going to upset their electorate all that much. So instead of actually being able to go over after him something that they could politically go after him for, they can't. I mean, you could go after the war thing, but all the right are a bunch of warmongers too. They agree with bombing Syria. So you can't do that. Yeah. And they can't go after him for failing to come through on all of his socialist policies because they were fear-mongering about those to begin with. So that's a good thing for them. So what do? They got to start a culture war. How do they do it? By bitching about the genitalia of a fucking plastic potato.
And my favorite part is they blame Biden for that. Again, it's like, you can hate Biden, you can love Biden, but he had nothing to do with the potato.
At all. No. Not even a little bit. It was a private company doing what they want to do. And it's funny. The right only seems to have a problem with a private company making a decision when that decision affects them.
But it didn't even affect
them. When it
doesn't even affect them.
When it offends them, the fucking snowflakes.
The thing is, they're not even offended. That's the thing. It's absolute fake, total fake outrage. That's all it is. Yeah. It is total performative action. They don't care that Mr. Potato Head doesn't have a pair of testicles their child can bolt on anymore. Like back in the good old days when Mr. Potato Head had physical genitalia. But imaginary potato problems aside, there's never an instance where the right isn't on the wrong side of this one.
Ever.
Whether you want to talk about Mr. Potato, I mean, look at the Cat in the Hat. You know, should be a conservative celebration point. Bakeries shouldn't have to bake wedding cakes for gay people, apparently, so you think the Dr. Seuss family can decide what books they feel like publishing. But instead, you've got the right doing, I guess, what you would consider a neo book burning, where they're freaking out that the family of Seuss doesn't want to keep publishing books they've never fucking heard of. This isn't the Cat in the Hat went away because there weren't enough black cats in it. No. These are books that literally mocked in the depictions of Asian people and called them animals and things like that. And the Dr. Seuss family didn't want them. And it's like they stopped publishing them because they were harmful. And conservatives go, see, look what Biden did. It makes no sense.
Let's just add on to that because there's more context to give here. So these books were not big sellers to begin with. It wasn't like this is from the most, we're not talking about Green Eggs and Ham and Cat in the Hat here. These are low-tiered books in his repertoire that people mostly didn't even know about. They had racist depictions of not just black people, but Asian people as well. And they're really just, they're from a time where we just don't need to deal with that shit anymore. And so the company was like, you know what? We're not going to retract anything. We're just going to stop making these. And we got two just amazing reactions. One, the right has en masse been purchasing these things. So it's pretty much like these books are racist and we really shouldn't be having them. The right was like, I don't think so. We're going to buy all the fucking copies we can get. Racism. Yeah. But then there was another one, and this one isn't the only one, but I want to bring it up because it involves the biggest piece of shit in the world, Ted Cruz. His big response to this was to publicly read copies of Dr. Seuss, sign them, and then sell them for $60 a pop.
Yep.
And guess what Dr. Seuss book it was? Cat in the fucking Hat. He's
the one he used to filibuster with.
Yep. He's publicly reading it.
That's not one of the ones that they're fucking stopping publishing. At all.
So in response to this, he's taking a book that is in no way impacted by this decision, reading it out loud as if he's somehow protesting, and then turning around and buying copies that he's probably paying about $20 for, signing them and selling them to pay for his campaign.
Look, can we just be happy that
Ted Cruz, the biggest turd piece of the world.
If any of you are wondering why there was sudden beeping going on during Matt's Ted Cruz rant, he's now been canceled. So this is now the Kay and Chris show. Welcome back, everybody, to the double alt left.
Good evening, everyone.
It was terrible. The cancel culture kicked in, and Secret Service agents with Biden stickers walked in the door. They shot Matt in the head, and it was all over. That's what this is. That's what this is. First, they came for Gina Carano. Then they came for my Jumbo Johnson. And then when they came for me, there was no one left to make racist jokes.
It's okay, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back. I apologize for that rant. As some of you know, I'm quite passionate on the topic of hating Ted Cruz. And, don't
you ever apologize for hating Ted Cruz.
Oh, thank you.
As you should hate Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz is a piece of shit. But
he is.
We digress.
Yeah. But that thing is, no matter who is doing this, isn't canceling. Again, this is the free market at work, as they always say they want, but they can't handle it because again, and that's just and I think that comes down to like the Gina Carano thing. I'll at least give them some credit where that was something they didn't fabricate themselves. That was an actual conservative suffering actual consequences. So they're still wrong and it's still stupid. But at least it's not make-believe. This Cat in the Hat thing and the potato head thing and most of this false, fake BS outrage is just that. It's absolute horseshit. Liberals, Democrats, Obama, no one did this. Biden didn't cancel Cat in the Hat. The President of the United States does not have the authority to personally censor books he doesn't like. Just because these are the ones at your reading level doesn't mean you're allowed to be mad at people who had nothing to do with it. The family decided they didn't want to publish it anymore. So are you telling me, conservatives, that you want people to be forced to not have control over the words they publish? That's the freedom of speech you want?
Well, they want people not to be able to choose what they do with their bodies.
Yeah.
Why not choose to do what they want with their eyeballs?
Apparently they don't want private companies to be able to make their own decisions either. Apparently they want the government to step in and regulate those companies so they can't do certain things.
Republicans wanting a government so small it can fit into your bedroom in small business.
Well, and the biggest joke that I found in this is, some of you may have noticed we didn't do quite the big history deep dive on this because, I mean, there isn't a lot of history behind this. I mean, in whatever forms you call it, boycotting, cancel culture, the free market working. I mean, this is a common thing that humanity's done for years. When we don't like something, we decide we want to mobilize and take it down. In a lot of these instances, like I was saying with Louis C.K., there really aren't that many consequences. I mean, yeah, a big group of people will get together and say, I don't want to support this person, and that might be true. But Louis C.K. came back and is still selling out wherever he plays. And a lot of the places like the bakers you're talking about, their business didn't suffer because there was a big right-wing counter movement that threw business their way. They're railing against something that is not even happening. You can't say this person has been canceled because they haven't. They're still active. They're still successful. And they were long term, there was no real negative effects. Like, yeah, there's a lot more people calling Louis C.K. a piece of shit now.
But I would say he's an outlier. Like, that thing is, the thing with cancel culture is the reason why, again, I hate, just for every listener, we're not acknowledging this is a real thing. But for what the right calls cancel culture, a lot of times there are. I mean, look at Milo Yiannopoulos or whatever the hell his name is. Like, that guy's career is toast. It's toast because he's an absolute sack of crap, but it's toast because he was what they would call canceled. People didn't want him around anymore because he was such an asshole. Gina Carano's career is toast because she's an asshole, you know? So it's like, I would say that a lot of times they do suffer financial consequences. But again, I don't want to say it's a bad thing. That's a good thing. The fact that Louis C.K. is still making money is the system failing. The consequences failed on that one. We want them to not have the money, and that's what it is. You have done something so abhorrent to the culture and to the society at large that we don't want to give you our money anymore.
And here's the thing. I get your point. I think you're wrong. And I think it's the opposite because largely these things tend to not work. I think Milo Yiannopoulos is an outlier. I think Gina Carano, time will tell because she was offered like $1 million contract by Ben Shapiro. Okay. He offered her a contract. So she went from one place to another. How that pans out, I don't know. And she could go on an apology tour and a bunch of other places, not Disney maybe, will probably pick her up because she apologized. Also look at the opposite side. Like whenever the right tries to cancel something, there's a big movement on the left. Like the right went and burned all their Nikes and Keurigs. Keurig sales went up. Nike sales went up because of the good things they were doing.
But there's a difference, though. What the conservative points are not in the mainstream cultural zeitgeist. That's the difference. So Gina Carano, right? Well, what's she going to do? I mean, sure. I mean, I guess maybe she'll make a few bucks here and there as a guest appearance on Fox News. But maybe she'll make some money doing a commercial for Parler at some point. But I mean, that's the best it's going to get. She's going to do fringe weird shit for the fringe weird group. She's not making Disney money. And she will never make that.
And again, that might be true, but we're talking about levels of success here. She will still have more money, wealth, power, and success than the average human, despite this.
The thing is in 5 years,
but she had that before she was
all
canceled.
Be forgotten.
But again, that's my point. What's the overall effect? Everyone that likes her is still going to like her. She still has money. She still has her influence among her crowd. So, like, what was canceled? Like, okay, one place she worked at is not going to work for her anymore.
No. Like, that thing is, that's minimizing it. No. First of all, she lost a contract, a highly lucrative, insanely wealthy contract with Disney, where she was about to be the star of her own Mandalorian type show. She missed out on millions. That's what she missed out on. Her career toast, and just like Kay was kind of saying, this is going to be forgotten in 5 years, and she's going to be a fucking nobody when she could have been a legend. That's what she missed out on. Her career is toast.
I'm just not convinced of that yet. Well, time will tell in my opinion.
Okay, but then give me, besides Louis C.K., who else was canceled for being an absolute total shitbag and then came back and has greater success? It doesn't happen very often. Those are outliers. They're very rare. Most people, Kevin Spacey came out, turns out he was super inappropriate with a minor, and then tried to blame it all on being gay. Everyone was like, you suck, you're done. Lost his show, no one will hire him. When you get to that level...
I don't see him in another... Because it's been 3 or 4 or 5 years. I don't see him in another 5 years coming back for any reason. Now, he doesn't have to work The man has plenty of money. That's not what we're talking about. He has the ability to live, but he's no longer going to have the same fame as he once did.
And the mainstream is not going to support you anymore.
But you're comparing two completely different fuck ups here. I'm trying to minimize what Gina did, but comparing what she said versus a guy who was found out to be a pedophile rapist, not the same. And if you want a more apples to apples comparison, I'll give you one because I mentioned it earlier. J.K. Rowling, she's still getting interviewed. She's still writing books. She's still got a Hollywood deal. I mean, there's another example for you.
Not nearly, because J.K. Rowling has it. She's right up there. J.K. Rowling is right where Gina Carano was at her first instance, where everyone was like, "Watch it," and that's where she's at. And first of all, nothing has sold like Harry Potter will. Her books are starting to tank. When she wrote her last super anti-trans book, a bunch of conservatives went and bought it, and then nothing else. She's not getting new movie and book deals. She's known in the public sphere as a pariah. Her days of writing Harry Potter style books are now done because she's been such an asshat and nobody wants her around anymore. And that's kind of what it is. It's like, yeah, she still gets to be rich. She still gets to get her royalties, but she did all that before everyone knew what a shitbag she was.
And just to clarify, I'm in no way saying that any of this is a good thing. If it were up to me, we'd storm these people's houses, steal all their money, and give it to the poor. They shouldn't be wealthy is part of it too.
No one should be wealthy.
I think a lot of this depends on the American people having a long memory and keeping this up. And I'm just not confident that they do. And again, let me say this. I would love to be proven wrong. I want Kay and Chris to be right. I'm just not 100% convinced just yet.
But I would ask you burden of proof. Besides the one example of Louis C.K., can you show me where that is the norm, where people bounce right back from this?
But I'm not arguing that people bounce right back. I'm just saying that in the long term, the effects are kind of minimal. Okay, maybe they don't get the TV spots or the contracts they do. I don't know. Maybe I don't have one that comes to mind. But again, I'm giving you the one. I think J.K. Rowling is the good example of this because she is right there. We're talking about, again, instances. I think the fact that Louis C.K. has a career is pretty fucked up because, I mean, he may not have raped anyone, but he's definitely guilty of severe sexual harassment. I think that kind of tells me right there. If people are willing to forgive that kind of thing, I absolutely see a world where 10 years from now, J.K. Rowling's still getting new contracts. Gina Carano's still working in Hollywood. If I'm wrong, great. I don't know that that's true. And if I can come up with a better example, I will.
Yeah, and I think this is also more of a phenomenon of the internet age. I would agree with you. I think this is in the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, going backwards. Yeah, I would actually agree that there is a cooling off period. In the age of the internet, no. Your anti-Semitic tweets are forever. That doesn't disappear. And when people Google you, that's going to pop up. And no studio, book publisher, Hallmark Channel, no one who's not part of the nutjob side media is going to take you on at this point. Again, I agree with you in the past. I think we've now hit an age in the 21st century where that shit's forever now.
God, I hope so.
People become too big of a liability.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the CEO of Papa John's, right?
Oh, God,
during
that guy.
Some sort of training thing, he used the N-word on a conference call, right?
Like you do in business.
And, well, yeah, of course, And then afterward, he was essentially forced out of being the CEO of Papa John's Pizza.
And then they got Shaq as an investor.
Well, sure, but whatever. Shaq's trying to make a couple of bucks. He's invested in all kinds of companies. My point is that this guy, while he's a piece of shit and should never have used the word to begin with, it stuck around. It has stuck around. Because it was only a few years ago. People 15, 20 years ago, there wasn't the same kind of social media that we have now. There wasn't that permanent record of things. Word of mouth and things like that. It's much easier to blacklist a an actor or an actress as a group of people in the entertainment industry. It's a lot easier today than it ever was.
Yeah, and again, sponsorship is a big part of that. Like, who's sponsoring the Trump cult these days? It's the fucking My Pillow guys. It's Goya Beans and the people who scam old people out of their homes and gold. Like, that's who advertises on Fox News. You think Trump's going to get another show on NBC ever? Fuck no, and none of his kids
Hell
will
no.
either. It's too toxic. They won't touch it. The public freakout is too shit about it. But the thing is, and that's what the right complains about. The right is super upset that they have backwards, harmful, toxic philosophies. They say and do things that actually cause harm, and they drag our society back to the dark ages. And they're very, very upset that there's consequences for that now.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, but you play shitty games, you win shitty prizes.
So that's our thoughts on this bullshit phenomenon of what the right calls cancel culture, what sane people call consequences for shitty actions. But tell us what you think. You guys can always email us if you have an opinion that differs from us on this one, and you have examples that we missed, or you agree and you have things you wish we'd hit up, or you have just something to bring to the conversation. Again, you can always shoot us an email, and that's always thealtleftpodcast@gmail.com. All one word. No crazy characters or underscores or ampersands. thealtleftpodcast@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. And we've actually, you guys have been amazing. We've been getting reviews. We've been getting comments. Interaction with our audience has been fantastic. We love you guys. We had never dreamed we'd have this many people listening to us already. You guys are great. So there's obviously always way too much to ever get a hold of in one episode. But Matt, I know you've got a couple of highlights that you want to bring in, right? You said?
Yep. Yeah, I got a couple things. So let's do the dessert first, the easy one.
That's me.
So I'm yeah. Yep. Double S, baby. So I did it again last week. When we were doing our podcast with Thanks I Hate It. Once again, check those girls out because they're amazing.
Fantastic.
I mentioned there was an issue with getting a review from iTunes because it dropped the review all the way to the bottom instead of moving to the top. Well, it happened again. So I'm going to be more cognizant of that going forward when you guys are dropping those iTunes reviews. This is from Danger Dork. Danger Dork, I'm sorry I didn't get this last episode, but I did see it now, so I wanted to give it out to you. Danger Dork gave us 5 stars on iTunes. So I have listened to about half the catalog, and I love this show. Some of the highlights I appreciate are knowledgeable conversations about specifically chosen topics. They are informative, educated, and sprinkled with humor. The 3 mainstays have different political ideologies, but all remain firmly tucked into the left somewhere. The Drug Wars episode was flat out amazing, and gun control was surprising. Highly recommend. Danger Dork, that was
wow.
Thank you so much. Honestly, we appreciate it. Yeah,
that was actually really sweet. Thanks, man.
That was the first good one. There's another good one. This one poses some questions and some updates on some things we mentioned before, so I wanted to read it out. This is from our buddy Stuffy is here. So he messaged us on Twitter, just finished up the Right to Die episode, and it was excellent as always. Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree that most sacred right in the bot is bodily autonomy, but there's one topic I would have loved to get your guys' opinion on: mandatory vaccination. I've always been for mandatory vaccines, as the decision to not vaccinate from contagious diseases infringes on another's right to not be sick and live in good health. I would love to get your thoughts on the next update. P.S. This is for you, Chris. Love the gun episode 2. I've actually looked at joining my local Michigan SRA chapter.
That is fantastic. It's, the Socialist Rifle Associations, they're small. They're not super organized. It's a budding movement, but it's great. Anything where we can start taking the power back of an armed classless society away from the right wingers and remove the gun issue from the white nationalist movement is just always for the better. Never touch the NRA or any of them.
And to answer your question, I'm also for mandatory vaccination. And the reason being because it's a public health issue. You not getting vaccinated could cause the death, or at the very least critical harm, of another human being. And doing it is literally the bare minimum.
Ooh,
again,
we disagree.
Oh, okay. So, well, we'll get there. So in my opinion, again, there needs to be exceptions for people that can't get vaccinated. Of course, I'm not going to make somebody with an egg allergy get a shot. But I think you absolutely should be compelled to, because herd immunity is needed. We need at least 70%, preferably 90% of the population, to make sure that those that can't get vaccinated are protected against it. So yes, I'm for it. I don't think we'll ever get it, but I think it's a thing that's needed.
Yeah, herd immunity doesn't mean that everyone gets a vaccination. Yeah, it's obviously like, once you hit that majority of the population, the reservoir dies. But I actually don't believe in mandatory vaccination. That comes down to body autonomy again. I'm sorry, I really don't. I don't believe the government should ever be able to force you to take, if you're an adult, to take on a medical procedure. However, I believe there should be consequences for that. So if you don't want to vaccinate your kids, that's fine. But that means they can't go to public school because, again, your right to swing your arm ends at the next person's face. You have a right to not vaccinate people and yourselves. But that may mean you don't have the right to take public transportation or fly on an airplane or go to a public workspace or go to a grocery store. If this hits a certain point, we could have vaccine cards for people. And you either have that or a medical exemption. That's the end of the story.
I don't know about you, but I got my vaccinations, and I have a vaccination card. Thank you.
So do I. But imagine if
it was issued by the CDC.
I have one too. But the point is, I'm okay with consequences for not being vaccinated for no good reason. Again, if you have an allergy or something, it's like you could easily get that there could easily be a system where just as easy it would be to get your vaccine card, you could quickly get an exemption card. Easy ways to do it. But in terms of forcing people to take a vaccine, it's a bit too draconian for my book.
I've seen too many instances of children with measles to be in favor of that. I mean, I think you're onto something, and I think there's some interesting ideas in there.
So what happens if someone refuses?
I mean, and again, I don't have a solution to that. I don't have the answer for you. I also think it's absolutely horrible because parents and adults can choose. Children can't. They're going to have the choice made for them by these people, and it's going to force children to die of polio, measles, and diseases that they should never die from.
We're not talking about children. We're talking about adults. I absolutely, when it comes to kids, I have a disagreeing opinion. I think that is child abuse to not do that. So no, I am for you on vaccinating children. But with the COVID vaccine, we don't vaccinate children.
And again, as per usual, like when you get down to the minutia of it, we disagree on very little.
They're working on that. And for the record, just real quick, I actually agree with you, Chris. I don't believe in mandatory vaccination, but I do believe in the consequences of not vaccinating.
Yeah.
I believe that a business has a right to mandate that their employees get vaccinated. I don't care what kind of business it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you as an employer make one of the conditions of that employee working there getting vaccinated, then guess what? You get to get vaccinated.
Yep.
Or you don't get to have a job.
Here's the thing: as an American citizen,
I don't believe in exemptions. I don't believe in the religious exemption. I don't believe in
medical exemptions. Is what we're talking about.
Medical exemptions are not what I'm talking about.
But that's what no one's talking about religious. We're talking about medical. Like Matt brought up allergies.
I was just drawing that hard line of I don't believe in the bullshit exemptions. The only exemption is when a doctor says you are immunocompromised and you cannot survive getting vaccinated.
Yep.
Other than that, there is no excuse for not getting vaccinated, in my opinion.
Now, and
this bullshit idea of that a vaccination is, bad or wrong or any of those things. Oh, it's not proven. Well, fuck you. Sorry.
Yeah. And the thing is that I will agree there is a hiccup in our plan here, and that is that it does put a paywall up and there is a privilege of having medical care, which is why I recommend the CDC can easily have a state board evaluation where it's like, oh, you have an exemption? Cool. Set an appointment just like you would a vaccine. And you come in, you tell them about your asthma, you bring in your medical documentation, they can issue you an exemption card. But that would be the only way to do it, is it would have to be just as free as getting a vaccine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think body autonomy, if we're going to say body autonomy is key, you can't force someone into a medical procedure. Now, you can say because you opted out of this medical procedure that saves others' lives, you don't get to fly on an airplane. You don't get to hold down your job. You don't get to take the bus.
To ride in a bus.
You don't get to go to the grocery store.
You don't get to go to movie theaters.
Yep.
You don't get to eat at restaurants.
100%. Just like screaming the N-word in public, you have a legal right to do it, but that's you yeeting yourself out of polite society. And you're not going to get to keep your job, and the grocery store is going to throw you out. Same thing.
Yeah, and here's the thing: I don't necessarily have a problem with that position either. I think that's a cool option too. Something to think about.
I just the idea of a mandatory vaccination, because it brings to mind the images when someone refuses. The only option is either prison or strapping them to a chair as they scream no and putting needles in their arms. Either one, not a good look for the state.
Cool. So there you go, Stuffy.
Congratulations, Stuffy. You got us in fighting.
So then the next one we've got is from our North Carolina peep, TD Gamer. Just as an addendum to the abortion topic, in terms of consent, he gave us a little note. Apparently, North Carolina had some weird legal loophole in their laws that made it impossible to revoke consent. You could not revoke consent in North Carolina until 2018, 2019.
Yep.
That was a law that
Oh.
just recently passed. And I
So
thought that was,
changed.
it was,
Got
it was,
Thank
I mean,
God.
yeah, that's not the case anymore, but that is scary.
Yeah,
Like,
I recall like 6 or 7 years ago that was a big news item, and it was terrifying.
I wish I had known about it when we had Britton Windsor on, because that would have been an interesting topic to discuss. Every once in a while, usually I'm not surprised by the just piles of awful that come out of the South, but every once in a while, something like this comes up, and this, like, it shocked me. It really did. Thank you for getting back to us with that, TD Gamer. All right, so the last one. This is a meaty one. All right, guys. This was an interesting one that I wanted to give out. So we do get disagreement here and there. Generally, it's from some right-winger asshole telling us that, we're a bunch of libtard cucks who, don't know about facts. But every once in a while, we will get some reasonable, interactions. And this one, I'm not going to say it was reasonable because I don't think it was, but it actually brought up an interesting discussion and an interesting debate. So this was on MeWe, and as some of you may know, I regularly post clips to promote each episode, little snippets of things that we discussed. And I posted a clip from episode 15. This is about physician-assisted suicide, where it was essentially the three of us discussing how conservatives lack empathy. Like, that's the problem with conservatives, is they don't have empathy for anyone other than themselves, their immediate family.
Truth.
Or people they know. And that was kind of the gist of the clip. And a user, DenW, so DENNW, and he responded with this. He says, the United States is a country full of loveless and unlovable people. Common knowledge. What needs to be discussed is not the lack of empathy, but what to do in order to bring about compassion and caring. Now, I had a problem with this, and so I wrote back to him because first and foremost, compassion and caring are the same things as empathy. But more importantly, you can't fix a problem unless you understand what the cause of that problem is. And that was the gist of the back and forth that we have, but it was quite long. So rather than just sit here and read to you what he said and then what I said and then what I decided to do this a different way. I've already sent a copy of this conversation to Kay and to Chris so they could pre-read it. The gist of his argument was that, in my opinion, putting it out there for everyone, so I'm going to say this is my opinion of what he was saying, is that talking about this topic makes me feel bad. Everyone always wants to focus on the negative. Let's focus on the positive and find solutions. And so I kind of challenged him. I said, okay, if you want to expand on this and provide me with some solutions, do it. And he did. And I told him we would respond in kind here. And so I'm going to read the solution. I'm going to let the guys talk and address some of the other points that he made. And then that's where we're going to kind of end the shout out section. I will preface this by saying I do think he was very respectful in his responses and his engagement. I disagree with him completely, but I do want to say special shout out. Thank you, Den W, for making this an interesting exchange and giving us something to bring up. His response here was, no need to discuss the problem. We know the problems. It's been discussed since forever, and we need action, like taking time to utilize your resources where they can do the most good. The issue I have with most left platforms, they spend an inordinate amount of time pointing out what's wrong. We get it. Where are the volunteers for the food banks? The people that can assist the challenged both physically and mentally? I've been hearing the talk since I voted for Carter. Not sure if you were a voting age. I wasn't then. But the point being, one has to put it on the line as we did. Forums and talk are great, but that's all we ever get from the current generation that's coming of age. Again, I think he's a boomer. Could be wrong, but this is very boomery talk to me. The reason being they are not connected to their communities and far too many are not willing to step outside of their comfort zone, which is my question for your next episode. What is it going to take to get young people to step outside their comfort zone? I'm not going to respond first. It's going to go to Chris. And for a very specific reason, I know Chris knows why. Chris, why don't you tell him about yourself a little bit?
Well, something Matt sent us these right when we started recording, so I didn't have a whole time to go do a deep dive on it. But I would say that, first of all, a couple things. Your argument lacks any actual merit. And that's not to, like, I'm not trying to make a personal insult or anything, but it's logically fallible. And I say this because if you're going to make an argument saying this generation, okay, you're making a generalized argument. And there are times where a generalized argument can work. You can say, like, all Nazis are bad. Like, there are times where, yes, in extreme circumstances, you can make a hyperbolic argument. But to decry an entire generation, again, whatever generation you are, whether you're a Gen X, you're a baby boomer, it doesn't matter. Like, the generation before you made the same complaints. Generational arguments are simply old people yelling at clouds. They don't make sense. All generations go through evolution, and generations themselves are a social construct that don't really exist, kind of like cancel culture and gender. Moving on from that, I would have to say, as someone who does regularly volunteer at the food pantry, most people who are volunteering at the food pantry, who are unloading trucks with me and are walking around the pavement and handing out food and passing out food and getting people signed up and handling all of that, there's only a couple who are over the age of 50. Everyone there is between the age of 16 and 30 mostly. There's a few people who are over 30, not a lot. The majority are actually youthful people. I personally have 3 friends who did a stint in the Peace Corps right after high school. I am a very active protester in my community, and most people I know do something of that accord to give back to the world. Now, we're talking about my own personal bubble, but to sit there and say, where are the young people? Where are the food pantry? Right here, buddy. I'm right here with you, and I'm decrying the problem because you cannot solve a problem until you have identified that problem. And part of the solution, even once you've identified it, part of the solution is screaming about the problem. How do you think the U.S. got pulled out of the Vietnam conflict? How do you think the civil rights movement happened? You think Dr. King just walked up there and went, shit sucks, and then he went home? No. You protest, you march, you boycott, you do the actions, but you never stop bitching about the problem because the problem is not enough people agree this is a problem. So we have to keep talking about the problem because there are too many people who lack that empathy, who need to hear this isn't about their rights and this isn't about them being under attack. This is about giving a shit about your fellow human being. And people have to be humanized, sometimes ad nauseum. But until we all start agreeing, or at least the majority of us can agree on what the problem is, we have to keep talking about the problem. We have to work on solutions too. But that argument of like, I don't like the negativity. Well, the problem is negative and we have to talk about it. And there's no way to deal with a problem if you're too afraid to talk about it.
And I agree 100%. I think you guys saw my responses that I didn't talk about it. That I said as much to him pretty much. And again, I like his solutions. The point where we disagree is not that his solutions are valid. It's that those solutions are already happening and being worked on. I think he tends to take issue with our angle for the podcast, but we're doing a political commentary podcast here. A big part of politics is discussing problems. Part of getting solutions is by electing people that have the power to do them. That's another part. Chris mentioned volunteering. All 3 of us have volunteered in this group. Chris is by far the biggest one to that, but all 3 of us do regularly. Not only that, but all of us have joined Chris on protests. He's, again, by far the biggest protester in this group, but he has taken us along with him many, many times. And yes, we don't talk about it that much on this show, but I'm also going to say we're a brand new podcast that's building an audience. We'll get there. We have things that we want to see done. We've talked about things we want to see done. We've talked about changing ideas on this podcast. We've talked about changing, ways of thinking. But we've also talked about how we're not scientists, so we trust the scientists. And that's part of it too. Everything we've mentioned so far, protesting, volunteering, that's a big part of this as well. But we also need elected officials that can effectively initiate these changes, put them into place, make them law. And if everybody thinks there's not really a problem or nobody's willing to discuss the problem, what's the motivation to change those in power? There is none.
One of the reasons why we started this podcast wasn't just to hear ourselves talk. It was to discuss the issues that occur in this country and make them better known so that people like yourself might actually go out there and do something. At the end of our podcast, every episode, Chris always says, the revolution is you. And that's because we want you to go out and be that revolution. We want to talk about it, and we want everyone else, not just ourselves, but we want people to hear what we're saying, understand it a little bit more, have a different viewpoint than maybe what they already have, change their ideas, and then go out and do something. Because that's what's important. Part of our activism is our podcast.
100%, 100%. And I think that actually leads me to something else I just thought of. So bear with me on this, guys. But it leads me to something, one of the most common questions that I see posed to us, and we haven't really addressed it yet. And I think this is a good point in the show to do this. People ask, well, what do you mean by alt-left? So it's kind of twofold. The first one is it's kind of a dig at the alt-right. That's the surface level thing. It's like, it was a name that we knew people would recognize and they'd be able to associate, an alternative to what is the mainstream. That's what the alt-right was. We are the left. Now, that doesn't imply all the racist and bigoted connotations of the right. It leads to something else that I want to say. The reason we call ourselves alt-left is because the things we espouse, these aren't mainstream. I know a lot of our listeners may have heard these things before. These aren't ideas you're going to hear on Rachel Maddow. These aren't ideas you're going to hear on MSNBC, on Bill Maher. Those are the big mainstream voices that are out there right now. And I'm sorry, but they aren't cutting it anymore. They have become, in a lot of ways, just big platforms for Democrats to have people echo their talking points and not challenge them on anything. There's a few outliers there, but we need real progressive voices out there. And the reason we call ourselves alt-left is because we are the alternative left to that. We aren't some crazy dumbass Jimmy Dore fanatics. We believe in logic. We believe in policy. We believe in really affecting change, not just coming up here and ranting. And back to the point, Mr. Den W., I don't know if you listen to this podcast or not. I don't know if you've been listening to everything or if you've just been responding to clips. If you have been listening, you would know we don't just talk about the problem. We do offer solutions. And we will continue to offer solutions, but we're also going to continue to talk about the problem because that's how you understand these. You can't just be up there, well, I think people should do X, Y, and Z without telling them why you think that. And so thank you very much for the interaction. Again,
Yeah.
To kind of wrap things up here on a more activist note, as we've discussed, another user that I want to give him a shout out now. I didn't get a confirmation on whether or not I could use his full name, so I'm just going to refer to him as Gary. He was a Facebook user that kind of reached out to me and was like, hey, there's a situation that's going on. I was hoping you could use your platform to kind of give it an extra voice and let people know what's going on. This is specifically in Seattle, Washington. There's a local councilwoman. Her name, and I apologize if I get this wrong. Her name, I believe, is Kashama Sawant. She's a socialist that's actually been elected several times, won several re-elections since 2013, and she's in a bit of a battle right now. So for any of our listeners in Washington who might be in this lady's jurisdiction, I think that you guys should pay attention, help any way you can, because she's under attack. She won her re-election seat, and then there was a bunch of people that organized, mostly from rich white communities, that decided they didn't want her to have that city council seat, so they're organizing a recall election. And recently they lost a court battle where a judge said it was okay for the recall to go forward. They are currently appealing, but this is really nothing more than a bullshit tactic to override what the voters want. It's similar to what's going on with Gavin Newsom here in California. It's similar to what a lot of Trumpers have been trying to do all over the country. They don't like that they're losing, and so they're trying to pull bullshit tactics to override what the voters have mandated. For anyone that's listening in Washington, specifically Seattle, if you are part of her district, help organize, help get out there and help her fight this, donate to her campaign. because she needs your help. And this is a bunch of bullshit that needs to be fought.
Yeah, agreed. This is absolute crap. And again, the same thing is happening here in California as they are the alt-right is doing a huge recall campaign because they're super sad that they had to wear masks. And so therefore the Democratic governor's got to go, even though he literally has been, especially now that we know that Cuomo is a total dirtbag, completely lied about killing people, regardless of who he was sexually harassing. Like, nope, Gavin Newsom led the charge, spent California's money to still try to save people in other states, ended up pooling governors together to get PPE out there to first responders when no one else was. I'm sorry, the dude's literally was heroic throughout this. I disagree with Gavin Newsom about a couple things, not many. I think he's actually a pretty damn good governor.
Yeah.
I disagree with his gas tax. I don't like taxes on the poor. Anyway, it's a whole nother podcast. The point is, the attack on him is literally an anti-mask nonsense bullshit. And when they do these recalls, sometimes recalls can be good. But this one, just there's a whole right-wing movement right now to get rid of any, even moderate, if not leftist, out of power. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
Yep.
So they're trying to cancel them.
Yes.
Yep.
100%. And that's how you bring it back. The Reverend Dr. K speaking the truth. I think that's all we've got to say on this. Preaching the truth, yes.
Amen, brother.
And on that beautiful note, Chris.
But that's going to do it for us this week. So thank you for being here with us. We appreciate you. Thanks for letting us fear your ear holes. Thanks for reaching out with us and having these conversations with us. It's super important. And please join us next week. We'll be dropping here every Monday. And until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, the revolution is you.